video, I will introduce to you the vicious circles of segregation and inequality. How is this circle formed? How does it affect individuals? And how policies can help to break this circle. Segregation is most commonly used in relation to residential neighborhoods. However, there is a growing interest in how segregation is produced and reproduced across multiple domains of daily life: residential neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, as well as leisure time activity sites. It is increasingly acknowledged that segregation in those different domains of daily life is connected. The framework of the vicious circle of segregation explains how segregation in one domain leads to segregation in another domain in an orderly fashion. The orderly transmission of segregation emerges as a result of two mechanisms. These are the sorting of individuals into residential neighborhoods, workplaces or schools, and the exposure to and interaction with other people in those domains. Fundamentally, segregation is related to income inequality that is generated in the labor market. Each individual has skills, and the differences in skills affect the sorting of people into certain jobs and certain workplaces. Low-skilled people have to accept lower-paying jobs, such as cleaners, and high-skilled people can select better-paying jobs, for example, in the IT sector. Hence, income inequality is represented in the labor market and is related to the skills of each person. Inequality that is generated in the labor market is a source of inequality in the housing market. While sorting in the labor market happens on individual level, sorting in the housing market is a household-level process. This implies that housing inequality and residential segregation are also related to how people find partners and how they form households. Partners tend to be similar to each other. It is more likely that people close to each other in terms of age, ethnic or religious group or class, as well as having similar levels of education, tend to form couples. For example, young people aspiring for a university degree often find a partner among fellow students. Since similar people tend to form couples, households with two high-earning partners have much more financial resources in the housing market compared to households with two low-earning partners. And in class-based societies, high-income people often come from wealthy families and they can get support from parents when buying their first home. This is called the effect of the bank of mom and dad. Finally, the credibility of households with two high-earning people in the eyes of banks issuing mortgages is significantly higher compared to households with two low-income earners. Money buys choice on the labor market, meaning that high-income households have more choice compared to households earning lower incomes. However, for segregation to occur, households earning higher incomes should also have a preference towards certain types of housing and certain types of residential neighborhoods. The preference is towards living in inner-city neighborhoods and in high-reputation detached suburban housing areas among high-income people drives housing inequality and residential segregation. Poor people are pushed out from the city center, settling often in the high-rise blocks of housing estates in the outskirts of the cities. As a final factor, urban planning shapes the levels of residential segregation as well. If urban neighborhoods have a mixed housing, it is often difficult for households with high incomes to segregate themselves. If urban neighborhoods are more homogeneous in terms of housing, self-segregation of high-income households is easier to emerge. The sorting of parents into different residential neighborhoods affects the sorting of their kids into schools. In other words, an intergenerational jump in inequality takes place, since location of homes of parents and the schools in which their kids learn is related. In many cities, schools are geographically bounded catchment areas and they draw kids from living nearby the school. If residential segregation is high, kids from high-income families attend certain schools and kids from low-income families attend certain schools. Schools in high-income and low-income neighborhoods tend to have different learning outcomes. And this is for many reasons, ranging from higher financial resources to higher demand for quality teaching in high-income neighborhoods. Schools are also places where values form and friends are made. In addition to skills, social networks also matter when it comes to hiring in the labor market. As a consequence, the differences generated at schools and in education lead to the differences in labor market outcomes and in residential segregation, thus closing the vicious circle of segregation. Leisure time activities reinforce the formation of the vicious circle of segregation. How can policy contribute to breaking this circle? In my opinion, the successful policy interventions should address segregation as a multi-domain phenomenon. The combination of people-based, place-based, and connectivity-based policies can help to reduce inequality and segregation and achieve more inclusiveness in cities.